Yes, it is. Well, let's start as a subcommittee.
Just as a formality, we have you sign in.
Come on up, buddy. Come on up, Senator Padilla. We're going to go ahead and start as a subcommittee. Recognizing Senator Padilla, this is file item number 7, Senate Bill 655. Mr. Padilla, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This is SB 655, and I guess in context, first let's recognize that California in recent years has enacted legislation to both tackle greenhouse gas emissions as well as legislation to up the ante on California's use of clean, renewable energy sources in order to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and meet our energy needs. To achieve these goals, it's imperative that all important state agencies and departments work together to ensure compliance. Most of us are familiar with the roles of the California Public Utilities Commission and the California Energy Commission, and the roles that they play to achieve, again, the goals on the greenhouse gas reduction as well as renewable energy use. But given that the California Independent Service Operator manages approximately 80% of California's electrical grid, I believe it is imperative that it also have clear legislative direction to participate and coordinate with the PUC and the Energy Commission to comply with both AB 32 and our RPS policies. This will ensure that we not only pursue these policies but try to reach them in a manner that's more effective and efficient. Specifically, this bill will, first of all, reinforce the ISO's mission to ensure grid reliability, as well as protecting the public's health and the environment. Second, would require the ISO to consult with and coordinate with the appropriate state and local agencies in furtherance of the state policy. And finally, would require the ISO to appear annually before the Assembly Utilities Committee and the Senate Energy Committee, similar to the current requirement on the President of the PUC. This bill has received overwhelming bipartisan support in the Senate. I'd ask for your aye vote.
Senator, since I have the gavel, thank you very much. We tried to move the bill second. We have to get a quorum we can, but are there witnesses in support or opposition here today? Support?
Thanks. Dan Cobb, Union Concerned Scientist. We urge support for the bill. Thank you.
Mary McDonald with the California ISO. We really appreciate Senators' good work on this bill, and we believe that it's very workable and look forward to appearing before both the Assembly and the Senate committees.
Any other support in the audience? Any opposition? Any questions from anybody on the committee? Well, then, staff, I'm not sure how to go because we would put the bill out in a second, but we need to wait for a quorum. So can we just move to the next item? Senator, unless you want to close, your bill has support on the Republican side and the Democrat side, so I'm sure we'll get it out for you.
I thank you in advance.
There you go. Thanks for coming. Senator Lowenthal? Oh, great. Let me see. Here comes the chair. We'll let him take over.
Okay, Madam Secretary, let's establish a quorum. Please call the roll.
Fuentes.
Here.
Duval. Berryhill. Blakesley. Buchanan. Carter. Fong. Fuller. Furtani. Huffman. Krikorian. Skinner. Smythe. Swanson. Tirico. Valines.
Mr. Chair, may I move SB 655 by Senator Padilla?
Very good. That bill has been moved. There was a very simple amendment. Are you moving it with the amendment, Mr. Tirico?
The author is
Very good. The second? Very good. Having heard the motion and the second, let's go ahead and call the roll. It's Padilla, item file item number 7, as amended.
Fuentes.
Aye.
Fuentes, aye. Duval.
Aye.
Duval, aye. Berryhill. Berryhill, aye. Buchanan. Carter. Carter, aye. Fong. Fong, aye. Fuller. Fuller, aye. Furutani.
Delete, but it doesn't say.
Huffman. Krikorian. Krikorian, aye. Skinner. Smythe. Swanson. Swanson, aye. Tirico. Tirico, aye. Valines. Valines, aye.
So,
Huffman, aye. Furutani. Furutani, aye.
very good. That bill's out. Mr. Lowenthal, come on up. You're our next author here, presenting on SB 120, file item number 3.
Thank you, Chairman Fuentes and members. SB 120 helps tenants caught in foreclosure to maintain their utility services by addressing two issues that are related to utility services. First, the bill ensures that tenants in a foreclosed single-family home will be able to connect utilities in their own name. Not surprisingly, landlords in foreclosure often stop paying utilities. Some utilities demand the back payment before restoring services for the tenant. SB 120 stops that practice. Second, while current law requires utility providers to post a notice on a multifamily property if utilities are scheduled to be turned off, this bill gives tenants better actual notice. It does so by requiring a written notice that can be either posted, handed to a tenant, or mailed, and by extending the notice requirement to single-family rental homes. Many California renters are living in homes that are being foreclosed upon and taken over by banks. Often the original landlord set up and paid the utility bills as part of the rental agreement. When that landlord loses the property through foreclosure and at the same time stops paying the utility bills, a tenant may not even know about it until she or he comes home from work one day and finds the electricity or the water cut off. SB 120 will provide some notice and some rights to those tenants. I ask for your aye votes, and I have here people in support.
Very good. Witnesses in support?
Christine Menahan, Western Center on Law and Poverty. We're the sponsors of the legislation. I won't repeat a single thing that the author did. I would point out just a couple of things that are more than nuance, and they're important in change in law. What the bill would do is require a written notice in 5 languages, because right now there's some ambiguity as to how the utility is going to reach the person whose utilities are to be disconnected. A voicemail is left. Any of a number of things can be done in person, quick conversation in person. This bill just makes it clear that everything has to be in writing, and it also needs to be in the languages that are currently required elsewhere in law. The other thing that the bill does is it ensures that it is clear that current law, which currently provides that the tenant is responsible for the entire bill or subsequent use of the utility. It's in the same section, the same verbiage, and so there's a lack of clarity as to whether or not the tenant who is connecting in their own name will have to pay the subsequent arrearages of the owner of the property or just the service that they're required to pay as of connecting it in their own name. We ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Casey Kaneko of Suter and Associates on behalf of the City and County of San Francisco. 65% of the residential units in San Francisco are occupied by renters, and we believe that this measure will provide some very important protections for those residents, and we urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Meg Katzen-Brown on behalf of the California Water Association. We previously were in opposition to this measure. However, with the latest set of amendments, CWA happily removes its opposition from this bill.
Great, thank you. Additional witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition?
Manuel Zamorano representing Southern California Edison Company. And let me say that we appreciate all that the senator has done and his staff, and there's been movement in the right direction, but we still have some concerns with the bill. Currently, we have 4.2 million residential customers. Last year, we had 15 complaints. So we see that this is a situation that we really question whether it really needs to be addressed. Second, the way the bill is written, we have to assume that any time that the mailing address is different than the service address, we have to assume that the person who's living in the residence is a renter, because we don't have any knowledge, and we're not provided that knowledge of whether that person is the owner, whether they're the manager, or whether they're a renter. So we have to assume that they're a renter. The problem is if the renter is an owner, let's say it's an owner, and he has his mailing address sent to his office, we have to assume that the person living in that house is a renter, even though it could be an owner. Now, we have 51 days, it takes our process to cut the electricity off. Under this bill, we'd have to give 10 more days. That would be 61 days. The bill also states that any occupant in the house can have the service turned on in their own name. That means that owner who has the bill sent to his office could now have his wife reinstate that bill under her name and would not be responsible for the bill as the bill is currently written. This causes a big problem. Another thing, we're also under federal and state confidentiality requirements. The question is that can we disclose the failure to pay and not violate those confidentiality requirements of the customer of record? So those are the two big issues we have at this point. We are very supportive of the fact of a way that we would be able to mail notice. We agree with that. We encourage that. But we still have a situation in there where this bill could lead to a lot of fraud, and there would be no way for us to stop it. And let me say, we're only talking 15 out of 4.2 million customers as of last year.
Thank you for that testimony. I'm not sure that's quite empirical enough evidence for this committee. It may be that you all don't do a good job in outreach. I don't know, but I imagine that there's still opportunity for that sort of abuse. But thank you for your testimony. Any additional witnesses in opposition? Very good. The bill has been moved by Mr. Tirico, who, by the way, has substantial work in this area, introduced a bill similar to this last year, and it was seconded by Mr. Furutani. Mr. Swanson, you have a question.
I just want to know whether or not the Senator wanted to respond to,
just
the issues that were raised.
Yeah, I just want to that not only we have one of the state's utilities, or the East Bay MUT, that's in support. All the other utilities have no opposition to this bill. The fact that there are 4.2 million customers, only 15. Remember, we're talking about people who are not customers. They're the ones, it was the owner that was the customer. We're trying to, and folks don't even know who the utility is, so they're not in a position. All of a sudden, they come home not as a customer. They come home and find their electricity turned off, and no one is accountable to them in any way. This tries to provide a reasonable response to that, and as I pointed out, no other utility has a problem with this bill statewide. I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Tirico?
I was just going to say, now that the bill has a competent author, I'm very hopeful of its progress.
We have a wonderful author.
Very good. Any additional questions or comments from the panel members? Very good. We'll take that as your close, Mr. Lowenthal. Madam Secretary, please call the roll. The motion is due pass or appropriations.
Fuentes?
Aye.
Fuentes, aye. Duval?
No.
Duval, no. Berryhill? Buchanan? Carter? Carter, aye. Fong? Fong, aye. Fuller? Fuller, no. Furutani? Huffman? Krikorian? Krikorian, aye. Skinner? Skinner, aye. Smythe? Smythe, no. Swanson?
Swanson, aye.
Swanson, aye. Tirico? Tirico, aye. Valines? Valines, no.
Mr. Furutani's back in the room.
Furutani? Furutani, aye.
Very good. That bill is out. Thank you, Mr. Lowenthal.
Thank you.
Senator Negrete McLeod, come on up. We're hearing SB 32, file item number 2. Good afternoon, Senator. Good to see you again.
Again, yes. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. SB 32 would build on an existing PUC program that pays property owners a feed-in tariff for excess renewable energy produced on site and sold back to the utility. SB 32 will ensure that renewable energy is properly valued for its locational benefits and time of delivery attributes, and will further the goals of renewable portfolio standard. The key benefit in the feed-in tariff is that it enables a distribution form of renewable energy production rather than the massive power plants that require new transmission lines to be built. Often through sensitive areas, distribution generation utilizes the existing transmission network. In my district, there are thousands of acres of warehouse rooftops in what amount to a desert environment, with very little energy load to make use of net metering or the California Solar Initiative, and without the size of sophistication to compete with other energy producers in the electricity market, there is little incentive to put solar units on the rooftops. This is where the feed-in tariff comes in, offering a guaranteed market for the energy that is produced at a price that properly values the green benefits of this energy. I have with me here Sue Cately with the California Solar Energy Associations. But before we go there, regarding the amendments, the suggested amendment in Comment 3 relating to the ratepayer indifference language, my understanding that both the committee consultant and my staff spoke this morning, and both agree that the most recent amendments to the bill make this suggested amendment no longer necessary. The suggested amendment in Comment 5 relating to customers who have already received a subsidy under the California Solar Initiative, I accept the suggested amendment to require customers to pay the incentives they have received prior to being eligible for the feed-in tariff program. The suggested amendment on Comment 7 relating to the PUC authority, I'm fine with the suggested amendment to have the PUC conduct proceeding on the FITs and report back to the legislature. Comment 8 relating to the program cap, I'm fine with the amendment to clarify the cap language and the technical change to delete the reference to the PUC approving the FIT contracts for publicly owned utilities. My staff discussed this change with your consultant. And finally, I'm fine with technical amendments suggested on Comment 9. I understand that if the bill gets out, I understand that it's double referred to natural resources, and the amendments will be taken in that committee, if that's fine with you.
Very good. Thank you, Senator. And I know there's some conversation and concern from, I'm not sure if they're quite in opposition, but there's going to be witnesses with some concerns with regards to inspections and that sort of thing. So I'll wait until we get there. But thank you for taking those amendments. That enumerates the concerns that the committee had. Do we have any witnesses in support? It looks like we do.
Yes, I'm Sue Cately, the Executive Director of the California Solar Energy Industries Association. We are working with Senator Negrete McLeod on this bill and working very closely with the utilities and other groups to try to address our concerns. Feed-in tariffs, for those who haven't heard of them, have been wildly successful in other areas of the world to grow the market for solar, and we think that this bill will provide an opportunity to have that experiment here in the United States and in California specifically, where we can see more solar generation projects going to help reduce transmission congestion and provide more clean energy. Thank you.
Very good. Additional witnesses?
Mr. Chairman, members, Catherine Hackney, Southern California Edison. We'd like to thank the author and the sponsor for working so closely with us. We're just about there. We really appreciate that this is a very measured approach to expand our feed-in tariff program to allow for the commercial scale facilities up to 3 megawatts. We do have some ongoing concerns with specific provisions in Section 399.20D2 related to how you establish the price, but we have ongoing discussions with the sponsors and the author. In particular, we're concerned with the phrase on line 35, page 8, that states, and any other attributes of renewable power. We think that's just a little too broad and undefined. With respect to the following sentence, with respect to valuing a locational value for distribution, we support that provision, but would suggest that belongs in subdivision E as opposed to D. And then the last point I would make, which begins on line 40 of page 8 and follows over in page 9, suggests that the Energy Commission and the PUC establish cost of generation for each technology. We would suggest that that's probably not necessary or appropriate. From a ratepayer's point of view, what you're interested in is what does that kilowatt hour bring to you. If it's produced on peak, you're really indifferent as to what kind of technology does so. We have a time of delivery factor that multiplies the market price reference by 3 times. So it's if the market price reference is 10 cents, then you get 30 cents a kilowatt hour on peak. And frankly, we think that should be made available to any renewable technology that can produce that power on peak. So thank you very much.
Great,
appreciate it.
Mr. Kaus.
Kent Kaus with Pacific Gas and Electric in support. We'll continue to work with the author on some minor changes as outlined by Ms. Hackney, but we appreciate the size limitations that are put in the bill, both on the system-wide as well as individual units.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, member Cindy Howe with Sempra Energy, and we are pleased to be able to support SB 32. And we've been working with the author's office for a couple of years on this, and it's and we really appreciate the progress that has been made. Sempra Energy supports investments in renewable energy, but we are also trying very hard to make the current RPS system program in the state work. And SDG&E has voluntarily committed to procure 33% of renewable energy by 2020. We think a feed-in tariff can assist in the accomplishment of that goal with regard to the smaller facilities that are not able to effectively compete in the utilities RFP process, which we do annually to procure renewable resources. So the size limitation, 3 megawatts and below, is the right size for a feed-in tariff, because those are the folks who are not able, they don't have the sophistication, they don't have the resources to effectively respond to an RFP. So it makes sense to do a regulated rate for those customers, which does give them a guaranteed market. And so what we support is feed-in tariff that motivates the least cost, but innovates at the same time, creates innovation, incents innovation for renewable technologies. And we think that the way SB 32 is currently drafted does that. And so we are in support and urge your support of the bill. Thank you.
Very good. Additional witnesses?
John White, Mr. Chairman, members, John White with the Clean Power Campaign. We support the bill. We still want to see how the amendments work out to be sure we get it right. We would point out, though, that we do think there is some purpose and value in differentiating between and among the technologies, not necessarily based on their costs, but on the value that they provide to ratepayers. And we don't disagree with Edison's criteria, but we actually think that some of these technologies are different enough that creating the flexibility to look at them as different technologies as well as different products makes some sense. We also think that it's important to maintain simplicity. We think feed-in tariffs could be a very important driver of economic development by making it simple for customers to invest and to create economic development through those investments. So we hope that we keep working on this. We appreciate the leadership that the chair has brought to the issue. I want to keep working with you on your bill, and hopefully we get something to get us started in a manner that will be both cost effective for the ratepayers, but also lead to the innovation and the job creation that we think this is possible to do. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Dan Geis on behalf of the Agricultural Energy Consumers Association as well as the Inland Empire Utility Agency. We're in strong support of the bill, particularly with the amendments that we've talked about today. Quite simply, net metering doesn't work for ag, and it doesn't work for a lot of water agencies because of the intermittency of the way we use energy. And net metering is when you bank what you can make against what you can use. and you don't always know what you're going to use, particularly in the agricultural industry. We see great promise in the feed-in tariffs. We think this is a strong bill that will push this conversation forward, and we certainly hope for your support on this bill to allow the agriculture industry and water and wastewater agencies to maximize the ability they have to produce renewable energy.
Lenny Goldberg on behalf of TURN for small ratepayers. We've worked on this issue for a fair amount. We understand and believe that the 3 megawatt limitation is an appropriate one. We also, as I understand, just want to confirm that the amendments did not remove the language with regard to ratepayer indifference. So what we worked on, and I would just only reflect Ms. Hackney's comment about the somewhat vagueness of the phrase other attributes, but we have talked to the sponsors and we think there are ways of defining that so it's not open-ended for the Public Utilities Commission.
Very good.
And Karen Mills, California Farm Bureau Federation, in support as well. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you. Additional witnesses in support. Witnesses in opposition.
Pam Loomis on behalf of the Public Utilities Commission, which is opposed unless amended to the most recent version of the bill. The Commission has strong concerns over the language limiting or preventing the Commission from modifying the program, and also over the ability to set the feed-in tariff price. Pricing for feed-in tariffs is very complex and sensitive, and the Commission would appreciate the flexibility to react to whatever situations arise in the market and be able to adjust the price accordingly, because you can get into a situation where you're overpaying for the technology or underpaying and no technology is coming online.
Mr. Chairman, members, Duncan McFetridge representing the Coalition of Utility Employees. We remain opposed unless amended. However, we are working closely with Senator's staff, along with your staff, to address a couple of issues. One is in findings and declarations, we'd like to have some language that are dealing with the safe installation of these systems. The other issue is inspections every 2 years. We're working on language right now with the author's office, and then some recognition in the application process of who the developers are of the projects and where they're located. And I think we're going to be able to work that language out, and we'll be fine.
Great, thank you. Any additional witnesses in opposition? Hearing and seeing none. Members, any questions for our author? Very good. Thank you for the bill. I think it should be pointed out that the feed-in tariffs are a necessary, I think, vehicle in order to figure out how to motivate and incent more distributive generation. I will take a little exception to, or difference, I should say, with Ms. Loomis's comment about the number of feed-in tariffs out there. Right now, as far as we can tell, there are only 13 projects that have requested to participate in the existing feed-in tariff. So this bill, I think, goes a long way towards doing that, and the concerns about cost and that sort of thing, I noted that you also built in some cost containment, so thank you for doing that. This is a very good bill. I am happy that you've taken the amendments that we've offered. I would ask, though, that additional amendments that you do draft, if you could work with our committee staff to make sure that they fall in line with what our thoughts of the bill are. We'd appreciate that. And lastly, I do want to say, though, that I would encourage you to work with the amendment seeking to address the installation and inspection of these systems. 3 megawatts is a big system, and so we want to make certain that those folks who are most familiar with those are involved with that. So that being said, if you would like to close, happy to hear it. If not, we're happy to take a vote.
I was just going to say that I just came out of my own committee, which I'm chairing, and one of your fellow assembly member is there, and he had a room full of opponents and a room full of proponents. And if we did what everybody wanted, you'd have a nothings bill, because this side wants this side wants that. And as you know, this is not the first time I've brought this bill. Some of you were not here yet, but we had it before, and this committee that you were not a chair of, put in amendments. Then we went over to the Senate, and they took them out. Then they wanted them back, and then they wanted them out. So this is like a hula dance that we do here, you know? So anyway, I ask for your aye vote.
Senator, I also have a feed-in tariff bill, so we'll be dancing together. Mr. Swanson.
Mr. Chairman, since this is WAS, I would move the bill, and the senator is open for continuing discussion. So
We're trying to do the best thing we can and make sure that we don't harm anybody.
Very good. Well, the bill's been moved. We're looking for a second, members. Bill's been seconded by Mr. Fong. I'll take that as your close to the hula. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Fuentes?
Aye.
Fuentes, aye. Duval? No. Duval, no. Berryhill? No. Berryhill, no. Buchanan? Carter? Carter, aye. Fong? Fong, aye. Fuller? Fuller, no. Furutani? Huffman? Huffman, aye. Krikorian? Krikorian, aye. Skinner? Skinner, aye. Smythe? Swanson? Swanson, aye. Tirico? Tirico, aye. Valines? Valines, no.
Guys, this is going to affect your farm people. Come on.
Very good. That bill is out as amended to natural resources. To natural resources. Yeah. Yes, it's to be taken there.
So straight do pass.
Yeah. To natural. Okay. Very good. Oh, Senator Hancock, come on up. You'll be presenting on SB 363. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Hi, and members of the committee. Let me just start by saying that I will accept the amendments that were suggested by the committee and would also like to add Senator Pavley as a co-author.
Very good. So you're taking all of them as proposed in the analysis?
I'm taking all of them as proposed. I think that for right now, the ARA monies are the most certain to come in. If we get them all spent and it turns out, as we've been told, that you need the lower interest rate for school districts and we have additional monies to put in at some point, we can revisit it in another year.
Very good. Thank you for taking that. In comment 2, we will continue to work with you on that language, but understand that you're taking the amendment and we'll figure out the language. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
With that, you feel free to present.
Yeah, absolutely. As you know, in response to concerns about climate change, rising, energy costs and education cuts, schools, many of them would like to put energy conservation systems in place to save money. This would open a sub-account in the existing revolving loan fund, which has an interest rate of 3.69, I believe, or 6.5. And school districts have not been able to use that for a variety of reasons. They just don't have the upfront costs. Whereas if the interest rate was lowered to 1.5, they could actually finance the system from day one through their energy savings. And there will be ARA funds coming to the CEC. We've some indications that they are interested in a sub-account. So once, we would like to set up the sub-account once they confirm that interest, as the amendment indicated, and be ready to hit the ground running.
Very good.
When we receive the funds.
Do you have witnesses in support?
Yes.
Very quickly, Mr. Chairman, members, Ian Padilla with the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. We're co-sponsors of the bill. Of course, California is a leader in the green schools movement, but of course, as the senator indicated, the upfront cost is the reason that has been most prohibitive in terms of the fact that it hasn't been, there's not more funding for it, and so we believe this bill addresses that, and so we urge your support. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Additional witnesses in support?
Good afternoon. I'm Laura Wisling with the Union of Concerned Scientists, and we urge support of the bill.
Great. Additional witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Seeing and hearing none. Members, any questions for our author? Very good. Mr. Krikorian.
Just for clarification, so the amendments include the suggestion of including energy efficiency as well as solar incentives. Great.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I want to commend the author. When I was a member of a school board, our school district was in deficit, and one of the ways we turned around the deficit was by implementing energy efficiency and solar programs that allowed us to save energy bills and put more money in the classroom. It's a very important measure, and if you're taking amendments and you'd still be willing to do it, I'd like to be added as a co-author as well.
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, the bill's been moved and seconded. Moved by Mr. Swanson, seconded by Mr. Krikorian. Members? Very good. Would you like to close?
I would ask for your aye vote.
Great. Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Fuentes?
Aye.
Fuentes, aye. Duval? No. Duval, no. Berryhill? Berryhill, no. Buchanan? Carter? Carter, aye. Fong? Fong, aye. Fuller? Fuller, no. Furutani? Furutani, aye. Huffman? Krikorian? Krikorian, aye. Skinner? Skinner, aye. Smythe? Smythe, no. Swanson? Swanson, aye. Tirico? Tirico, aye. Valines? Valines, no.
Very good. That bill is out.
Thank you.
Looking for any additional authors here. Very good. We're still looking for authors. The time is just over 4 p.m. We're going to give authors 10 minutes to come down and present their bills. Welcome, Senator Wiggins. Good afternoon. You're here to present on two bills. We've got okay. Would you mind starting with SB 542? No, 542. File item number 6.
Been excluded. Renters make up about 43% of California households. Unfortunately, the incentives for energy efficiency and solar power aren't cost effective for either the tenant or the landlord of a property in many instances. This problem needs to be addressed so that all ratepayers who pay monthly fees on their utility bills to fund the state's solar and energy efficiency programs are allowed to benefit. This bill requires the Public Utilities Commission to create a program for owners and tenants of apartments and commercial multi-unit buildings to participate in energy efficiency improvements and solar energy projects. The bill also addresses an issue which occurred in district where an owner of a manufactured home, and that was Lou and Sylvia Balin, wanted to install a solar system on their home, but they couldn't get sign-off by the county for the installation. So as it turns out, the solution to this problem is a standard permitting process through the state's Housing and Community Development Department. The bill simply says that requires that the PUC and the California Energy Commission, CEC, to ensure that the solar system installers are aware of the permitting process so that there is no future confusion for solar installations on manufactured homes. So this bill is supported by Rick Holt Energy, TURN, and the Western Center on Law of Poverty. So you want to speak?
Yes, Gopal Shankar from Rick Holt Energy and Sustainable Napa County. Part of this bill came as a result of a project I developed for the GASA Foundation in Napa. This is a landlord. The GASA Foundation owns a building. They were the initiator of a sustainable Napa County movement, and to put their money where their mouth was, so to speak, they wanted to install solar on their building. They have a bunch of tenants in that building. And we had a couple of options, which is put one system to offset the energy usage of a bunch of meters, or have up to 11 individual meters or 11 separate applications. Since this is something the landlord wanted to do, the Gas Foundation, put in a single system. The problem that they encountered is that the 11 meters that were in an electrical closet, each tied to an individual meter, all had to be ripped out, replaced with a single master meter, a bunch of sub-meters, all of which unnecessarily added cost to the project and did nothing different. So the virtual net metering solution, which is something that has been developed for the multi-family single housing program, is something that could very easily have been applied to this, but since that was limited to multifamily low-income housing, it wasn't applicable. So we're just requesting that this be something that get extended beyond for all landlords and tenants.
Very good. Any additional witnesses in support?
Good afternoon. My name is Marissa Fresquez of the Planning and Conservation League, and we support this bill.
Great. Additional witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Seeing and hearing none. Members, any questions for our author? Very good. Ms. Buchanan.
Thank you. Could you explain to me, the way I read this was that you're asking the PUC to come up with guidelines for installing solar and qualifying for assistance on multifamily residences. So you were talking about net metering. I'm not sure how that fits in here.
No, this is the rule that we kept having cited at us was something called Rule 18 with PG&E, which prevents landlords from charging their tenants directly for electricity. The CPUC has come up with a virtual net metering program, which allows in multifamily low-income housing, it allows there to be one solar electric system, and the electricity generated by the solar electric system is prorated according to those different meters.
Right.
So that is basically the solution that we were asking for, to be extended beyond that group.
Ms. Buchanan, you may also be referencing the additional bill that Ms. Wiggins will be presenting
That's
that
what
deals with net metering.
That's what I thought, but I was confused when he was talking about net metering
Understand.
in this bill.
Very good.
Okay.
Members, any additional questions? Mr. Turner, would you like to testify?
I was here in support of 542 and
Great.
apartments, and we really do need to get attention, and we support Ms. Wiggins.
Thanks for being here, Mr. Goldberg.
I had a second question. And so what prevents, what's the primary obstacle to preventing owners of apartment buildings or other buildings from participating in installing solar now and participating in that?
Because there's no direct incentive. It's the tenants who are consuming energy. And so theoretically, they're the ones who have a motivation to reduce their energy bills through solar. The landlord doesn't. And it's only in this case with the Gasa Foundation, for instance, saying they wanted to have a zero energy building, that they took the initiative, but they had to undergo a lot of pain and suffering to do it. But if there was a solution whereby they could put in the solar electric system and the electricity generated directly offset the existing meters, so there's a solution whereby the tenants will continue to be charged for electricity. Any solar electricity the system produces gets applied to them directly, and the accounting of that can be done automatically by the utilities, which now falls within the purview, has to be taken over by the landlord.
Okay, and the reason you took these amendments to the bill was so that the PUC didn't have to start all over with a new report, because the MASH report attempts to give solar and energy efficiency to low-income folks who live in apartments. Your bill, 542, merely attempts to do the same thing for the rest of the people who live in apartments who are now not low income. Therefore, the PUC doesn't have to start from scratch.
So the PUC has taken you've amended it so the PUC is...
What we've done is the amendments that they took in Senate appropriations dealt with the reporting. We're going to ask the PUC to come up because they have, I think, an additional concern, since we haven't heard witnesses in opposition.
Okay, thank you.
That being said, witnesses in opposition, let's hear what your concern is with the bill.
Alicia Priego with the Public Utilities Commission. We're actually working with the author's office, who's asked us to reconsider our position because we are doing much of what is required in the bill. Our concern, or rather our opposition, was based on that fact that we felt that the bill was unnecessary.
Very good. Thank you. Any additional questions, members? Very good. Looking for a motion?
I'll move the bill.
Very good. Mr. Furtani moves the bill. Mr. Krikorian seconds it. Would you like to close, Ms. Wiggins?
I'd like to ask for an aye vote.
Very good. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Fuentes.
Aye.
Fuentes, aye. Duval. Duval, no. Berryhill. Berryhill, no. Buchanan. Carter. Carter, aye. Fong. Fuller. Fuller, no. Furutani. Furutani, aye. Huffman. Krikorian. Krikorian, aye. Skinner. Skinner, aye. Smythe. Smythe, no. Swanson. Swanson, aye. Tirico. Valines. Valines, no.
Did you vote aye?
Very. That bill is, if you like this one, you'll love the next one. That bill is on call. And we're going to now hear SB 7.
It's what?
It's on call. It'll be. If I had to predict, I think it'll be okay. But we're waiting for a couple members to come back and vote, so it's on call.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and hear the next bill, which is Senate Bill number 7.
Yeah, this is SB 7. And Chairman and members, first as noted in comment number 7 in the committee analysis, I'm taking amendments to the bill, which move the study required by this bill of the California Public Utilities Commission, PUC, to evaluate excess energy credits to Code Section 2851 instead of Section 2827. So this allows the PUC to submit their ongoing study regarding net energy metering by January 1st, 2010 to the legislature instead of delaying it. This amendment will instead require the PUC to report on excess energy credits in its annual report to the legislature regarding the California Solar Initiative, CSI. More members, with that, this bill allows a net energy solar customer to roll over excess energy credits if the customer does not use the credits by the end of the year for up to 2 years. So this bill also requires the PUC to include in its annual CSI report the value, if any, of excess energy credits not used from 1 year to the next. Members, the problem I'm attempting to resolve surrounds the rules of net energy metering. Existing law allows a customer of a utility provider, such as PG&E or SMUD, to sell solar power to the utility provider in order to offset the cost of his or her electric bill. So this is referred to as net energy metering. If the customer produces enough solar power to cover their electrical use, the customer owes virtually nothing on their bill at the end of the year. If the customer produces less solar power than the electricity consumed at the end of the year, the customer owes the utility provider money. The problem is that the customer can also produce more solar power than the customer consumes, but the utility provider doesn't have to pay the customer anything, like it's zero, at the end of the year. So some people will argue that the deal was made under the net energy metering statutes. Others will argue that it's not fair because the customer produced solar power when their utility company agreed to buy the power. But in the end, the customer believes he or she didn't get paid. SB 7 simply attempts to address this issue once and for all. So this is supported by Rick Holt, Energy and Sustainable Napa County, and I have Gopal Sankar to answer any questions you may have.
So Gopal Shankar again, Rick Holt, Energy and Sustainable Napa County. This bill started with most of my winery clients. First, it's got to be absolutely clear that these clients are sizing their system in a way that the maximum size is approved by PG&E and the utilities, which means that it's based on the historical 12 months of usage. They are not oversized systems. At the end of a 12-month period, sometimes because agriculture is, I think you heard a witness or whatever for an earlier bill say, agriculture, the load fluctuates dramatically from 1 year to the next. So as a consequence of load, let's say a grape production going down in 1 year, the amount of energy they consume in that year is going to decrease during harvest. The following year, the crop might recover, and there'll be an increased production, and so they'll be left with a bill owed to PG&E. So in 1 year, they have a credit which they lose. In the next year, they'll have a debit which they have to make up. So what the bill originally asked for was compensation for that bill credit at the end of the year, because this is net metering neutral. It is not an additional subsidy. And what has been compromised too is that it gets rolled forward in a couple of years. For a couple of years. This is, again, an okay thing. because we're in the early stages of an energy transition, and people will find useful uses for that credit. But for the time being, there is unfortunately a disincentive to continue to conserve electricity after you put in a solar electric system, because there's no benefit for doing it. The energy just goes to somebody else. Thank you.
Very good. Additional witnesses in support?
Good afternoon. My name is Marissa Fresquez from the Planning Conservation League, and we support this bill.
Alicia Priego with the California Public Utilities Commission in support of the bill. We believe that the bill provides customers a simplified form of compensation and flexibility as energy consumption patterns change over years, and also takes into consideration our net energy metering cost-benefit analysis that's due in January of next year.
Very good. Thank you. Additional witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Hearing and seeing none, before we open it up to questions for the panel, you'll be taking amendment as mentioned in comment 7. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
it's supported by many others, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Very good. The bill has not been moved yet, members. Very good. It's been moved. Looking for a second? Second. Very good. Thank you. Any questions for our author? Hearing and seeing Mr. Furutani.
Just so I'm clear, this is a 2-year period, and the credit and debit, I understand. So at the end of the 2-year period, even if you have a credit, you don't get paid for that credit. It's zeroed out.
At the moment, that's the way it is.
Okay.
That's right. It's intended to offset anything in the following 2 years.
But it will be.
Very good. Mr. Krikorian.
So just to follow up on Mr. Furutani's question, will the reporting requirements that are contained in the bill as it's been amended now include any kind of analysis of whether the 2-year continuation, carryover, if you will have an impact on consumer behavior regarding efficiencies, for example? Because I could see a situation where if you have a continuing 2-year rollover, it almost would incentivize inefficiencies, or at least it would not create an incentive to reduce demand. So is that a provision that's included in the reporting requirement?
No, that's fundamentally the problem as I see it, that this is discouraging efficiency. So hopefully within the next year, when the CPUC comes up with their report, they'll see there's a value to this credit that belongs to the host customer. That's the way we're hoping that it goes. So I don't know. The disincentive will continue to remain there if the CPUC rules that this is whatever, that it doesn't have a value to the.
Alicia Priego with the PUC. Just to address your question, yes, included in the report would be a cost-benefit analysis of those participating in the program and how that would impact other ratepayers not participating in the program.
And would that also include some analysis of whether this change would impact on usage? Because what I'm getting at here is that if you have a 2-year carryover of a credit as opposed to being paid under a net metering program for it, then you have this accrued credit that would then incentivize the customer not to reduce their usage. And so I'm wondering if that will be part of the cost-benefit analysis as well.
That's not spelled out specifically in this bill, but we can work with the contractor to include that in our report.
Okay.
And on that note, Mr. Krikorian, that's not completely spelled out, so we'll work with the author in trying to figure out how to prevent that situation. Mr. Furutani.
Thank you.
I have a question of the Vice Chair. And I apologize for making this assumption, but just based on past votes, I'm assuming the Republicans are not going to vote for this. Could you share why? Thank you. Could you share I just want to know what the position, just so I can get a sense of your thinking and what I'm sure it's not anti-solar. What's your thinking on it?
Well, I'm not going to support the bill because I just don't like the fact that all the ratepayers are paying for all this stuff for solar and for wind, and then the beneficiaries of these products are going to be able to boot them up and put them on their homes and everything, and they're trying to get the net metering back as the other ratepayers are paying it. I understand the goal here. I understand the goal is pretty soon you're going to want to check at the end of the year from the utilities of what you got back. But I just think it's irresponsible for all the other ratepayers in the state of California to foot the bill so everybody else could have fun with the sun, with the solar and wind. I'm going to vote no.
I don't like that.
No, I appreciate that, Mike. That's why I asked the question about zero, because I'm concerned if everybody that can afford it starts developing their own utility, and those that can't afford it end up paying for everything else, then I think we got a problem of equity. And we're going to have an energy gap that's going to be problematic, like we have so many gaps between the haves and the have-nots. So it is a concern. I was asking the question for that very reason, to see what you're thinking is. I am concerned about that. If people that can afford it get the incentive on the front end, and then they get to sell their excess energy on the back end, then they have their own little utility. And I know we're supposed to do it by the size of the amount and the whole, I forgot, scale of something. Yeah. I am concerned about that who ends up paying for this.
I'm not sure what you're concerned about.
Equity, that's what I'm concerned about.
The equity?
Yes. I'm voting for your bill as it is. I'm talking about the future where this is potentially going.
Mr. Furtani, I think you do raise some very good points here, because I think there's significantly different levels of income that could actually acquire a system like this, and then we're potentially aggregating the net surplus energy and then further crediting them on their bill. I think I understand that concern completely. There is, I will just play devil's advocate only because I'm chairing the meeting. The flip side of that is that there's some lower consumption as a result of that, and so prices ought not to be higher for other folks. I don't completely buy that argument, but I hear you loud and clear, and we will continue to work with the author to the point that Mr. Krikorian stated to make sure that it's a little bit clearer so folks don't end up with a check. I'm not sure that I'll completely allay Mr. Duvall's concerns about the program, but I think we can tighten up the language a little bit more. That being said, any additional questions for our author, Ms. Buchanan?
I said, it seems to me that if you're limiting it to 2 years credit, you're not carrying it out indefinitely. The question becomes, are you generating extra energy that's actually used? And the other question in my mind is, how much are you paying, in essence, whether you're paying directly or through future credits, how much are you paying in terms of the excess energy that's being produced? Because that has a great deal to do with whether or not, you have the haves or have-nots that are paying for it. So.
Sure. I think the analysis does a good job, if I remember correctly, in pointing out an example. You could have folks who can afford this sort of system who vacation and are gone significant parts of the year, and in essence they're banking the energy that they're not consuming and offsetting their utility bill when they are in town. So I think that's a concern that Mr. Krikorian was trying to address, and like I said, we'll take a look at that.
But after 2 years, it doesn't matter, right?
No, it zeroes out.
Because
but
whatever additional you're banking, you're not going to get credit for.
But I think the point that Mr. Furtani is making, so if you're gone and then you're banking time and then you're back, you're in essence getting, and now you're consuming energy, and now you're getting the energy essentially for free, whereas everybody else would be paying for it. So that benefit would only go to folks who can actually afford a system like this, and if this bill were to become law. So, I mean, I see the equity side of this brightly. I mean,
still a question. That's
right.
My question.
Absolutely.
It just seems to me that it depends on the level of credit you're giving them for the excess.
Sure, and it zeroes out, but you'll have free riders, if you're in that position to actually be able to bank the time. And so I think that's the concern here. So that's a good policy conversation to have. Very good. Well, the bill has been moved and seconded. Madam Secretary, I assume that is your close, Ms. Wiggins?
I ask for an aye vote.
Very good. The recommendation is due pass with amendments to Appropriations Committee. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Fuentes?
Aye.
Fuentes, aye. Duval?
No.
Duval, no. Berryhill? Buchanan? Aye. Buchanan, aye. Carter? Aye. Carter, aye. Fong? Fuller? Fuller? Fuller, no. Furutani?
Aye.
Furutani, aye. Huffman? Krikorian?
Aye.
Krikorian, aye. Skinner? Skinner, aye. Smythe? Swanson? Tarico? Valines? Valines, no.
Very good. That bill is on call, and we'll go ahead and take that up and have the absent members vote. Thank
Okay.
you, Ms. Wiggins.
Well, thank you.
Do we want to? All righty. Very good. Let's go ahead and, if it's, Ms. Pavley, did you shut down your committee already?
No, it's going.
Very good. You know what? Let's go ahead and move your bill very quickly here. Not to mention, yeah, I understand. Come on up. We'll do it very quickly, and then we'll get to Mr. Simidian here. Not to mention, I have to present in your bill in your committee.
I have no idea what's going on in my own committee right now.
Well, I'll tell you this much. I'm supposed to be presenting there. But in the meantime here, let's go ahead and take SB 488, item number 5. Let's see if we can move through this one quickly.
Yes, Chairman Fuentes, this is the Energy Information Act. For those of you who want to know how much your neighbors are saving on their energy bill so you can do the same, this is a very cost-effective, simple strategy. In response to the analysis, I would first like to say that this will be a relatively simple bill. It's been cleaned up. It'll require a voluntary reporting once a year on existing pilot programs done by municipal-owned utilities or investor-owned utilities. They're up and running. We're requiring to submit a report once a year for 5 years. You had suggested March 15th. We put down April 1st. Either date is good with us. Our sponsors will continue to work with your staff on the details in the bill, but the concept, as a supported analysis, is completely acceptable. It's a very simple bill to increase energy efficiency and save homeowners money on their bill. We know behavioral changes are needed to reduce energy consumption, and this bill does just that.
Very good. We'll work on either date for the year 2010, just
Correct.
so we're clear.
March
And you
15th or April 1st. I'm good personally with
Very
either
good.
one.
Thank you, Senator. And we're also taking, as you mentioned, the amendment in comment 4. With that, if you would like to very briefly present, that makes the committee analysis right. Please go ahead.
That was my brief presentation. Would you like to hear from a witness?
Take a motion in a second.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, witnesses and support, please.
Alex Lasky from Positive Energy. Just briefly, I'm pleased to be here. Thanks for having us. We work with 18 utilities across the country, including, I think, 5 or 6 here in the state. Sempra, SoCal Edison, SMUD, Glendale, both Sempra on both sides. And our program, which you guys, we're not in the new mailbox business. This is a blow-up of an example report that customers are receiving. It turns out that most Californians want to do the right thing. 90% of Californians say saving energy is important to them. Even more than that, say that they try and save energy in their own homes. And yet next to none of them have any idea whether they're doing a good job. It turns out that filling in that information gap, simply showing people how they compare, providing a contextual understanding of their consumption, and then targeted tips and recommendations have a reliable and profound impact on people's energy consumption. We are reducing consumption by between 2 and 3% across the country now, across 500,000 randomly selected homes. It has become the most cost-effective energy efficiency program that's being run by utilities.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Brownsey?
Mr. Chairman, members, Donna Brownsey. I'm also here representing Positive Energy, and just want to make one clarifying statement so that people in the audience don't get nervous, which is that the date would start at 2010, but it's really a rolling date whenever you can choose to submit voluntarily the report. So it's not that you would have to submit a report every year for 5 years. If your information is ready in 2012, then that's when you would submit it, or 2013.
Very good. Additional witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Seeing and hearing none. Members, any questions for our author? Very good. The motion, we're looking for a motion.
Move it now.
Very good. The bill's been moved and seconded by Ms. Skinner. The motion is due pass as amended to appropriations. Would you like to close?
That's for your aye vote. Thank you.
Very good. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Fuentes?
Aye.
Fuentes, aye. Duval? Berryhill? Berryhill, I. Buchanan, Buchanan, I. Carter, Carter, I. Fong, Fuller, Furutani,
Aye.
Furutani, I. Huffman, Krikorian, Krikorian, I. Skinner, Skinner, I. Smythe, Smythe, I. Swanson, Swanson, I. Tarico, Tarico, I. Valines, Valines, I.
Very good. That bill is out. Mr. Simidian, come on up. Welcome back, Mr. Simidian. How are you today?
Any day I can talk about renewables, Mr. Chairman, is a day I'm filled with a zestful enthusiasm for my work.
Fantastic. We had several hours of debate last week on SB 14. We did not take a final vote on the bill that day. Today, the author is here to present on the amendments that he will be taking in natural resources later this week. We will not hear witnesses since we did that extensively last week. I just wanted to go through the list here as I understand it, and then we can dialogue here for a second. You had agreed to take the technical amendments in the analysis as presented last week.
Correct.
Oh, and let me go ahead and have the secretary pass out the amendments so this way those watching and reading here can follow along. I'm sorry? Oh, if there are extras, we'll make them available here. I'm not sure if we have enough. Let's make sure that the author has them as well. Very good. I think there was also a second suggested amendment in comment 4 of the analysis that dealt with the cap on above market cost to include all the procurement activities or use to comply with the RPS, but to allow the utilities to voluntarily exceed the cap if the CPUC approves those specific contracts. Were you in agreement in taking those at this point?
And I believe that's the second amendment on the list that you've given me, yes?
That's correct.
Yes, and we have agreed
Very
to accept
good.
those as authors' amendments.
The area that you and I are still working on deals with the municipal utilities. As I have mentioned before, my strong preference is to adopt the Assembly Bill 64 version of the language, but I understand that we will continue to work on that. Having heard loudly and clearly from the municipal utilities, especially the ones back home for me, it's very important that you and I address that, but I feel comfortable having that conversation as the bill moves through the process.
And, Mr. Chairman, let me just make that commitment publicly. Let me thank you for your understanding on this. I think the challenge we've got is that there's some good language in AB 64 in my judgment. I think there's still some good language here. And then, as you know, we've got a lot of folks who have their own thoughts about what some good language might look like. So they're sort of going forward, I think it's all still in the mix. That includes the language of AB 64. That includes the language of this measure. I've heard your concerns loud and clear, and we're still working through these issues. As a practical matter, this bill, if it clears the committee today under your good auspices, is still going to go through the Natural Resources Committee. It may well get amended on this issue there. If it's fortunate enough to be out of that committee, it'll go to APROPS, and it may get amended there. So I just want you to know I heard you loud and clear, and I appreciate your willingness to let us keep working on these issues.
Very good. Thank you for that. I wish you the best of luck in Natural Resources. That is a tough committee. I also understand that there are a number of outstanding issues that we need to continue working on. And by no means is this limited to the delivery language on the grandfather clauses, the language on the caps on above market costs. There's a tremendous amount of work yet to be done. But rather than hold that bill up and being mindful of the time necessary to get it to Natural Resources, we'll continue those conversations. And having heard your commitment, I appreciate your good work on this bill, as well as Mr. Krikorian in his efforts in doing the very similar goal in reaching our 33% RPS. I'm comfortable moving the bill forward right now, but as always, reserve my right to take another shot at it, either in this committee or elsewhere. So that being said, I'll give you an opportunity to present if there's anything else that I missed in terms of what we're going to do here today. And after that, we'll open it up to some of our colleagues for questions.
Only to mention, Mr. Chairman, you made passing reference to the issue of deliverability language. That was a source of extended conversation and concern at the last meeting. I think we have made some progress on that issue over the course of the last week. I wouldn't say we're at yes yet, but I think we have made progress. There's new language and some different approaches that are circulating out there amongst the stakeholders. So I wanted to make sure that all the committee members who sat so patiently through the 3.5-hour meeting you were kind enough to give last week knew that that issue had been heard and that we're making progress on, or not patiently, as the case may be, knew that we were working on that issue. And then the one other issue which we, I think, had referenced at the last meeting and is the language between relating to the interaction between the Energy Commission and the California ISO with respect to muni transmission coordination. There is language that's agreeable to both parties, and we hope to be able to take that language and actually get it into the bill in resources at our next hearing.
Very good. Thank you for that. Mr. Krikorian.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move the bill with the proposed amendments.
Very good. Looking for a second, members.
Second.
Very good. Mr. Furutani has moved and seconded the bill. That's a pretty good close, Mr. Simitian, if you'd like to take it. Very good. The bill has been moved and seconded. Madam Secretary, please call the roll. The motion is due pass to natural resources as amended.
And with the amendment just
To be taken in natural, right.
Fuentes.
Aye.
Fuentes, aye. Duval. No. Duval, no. Berryhill. Berryhill, no. Buchanan. Buchanan, aye. Carter. Carter, aye. Fong. Fuller. Fuller, no. Furutani.
Yes.
Furutani, aye. Huffman. Krikorian. Krikorian, aye. Skinner. Skinner, aye. Smythe.
No.
Smythe, no. Swanson.
Swanson, aye.
Swanson, aye. Tirico. Tirico, aye. Valines. Valines, no.
Very good. That bill is out and on its way to Ms. Skinner's committee. Thank you, Mr. Simitian. Thank you, colleagues. You'll note that it's 10 minutes before 5. We move this quickly. So we will. We do have 2 bills on call. We'll go ahead and open the call on those 2 bills.
Thank
and
you
then
again,
we'll hold,
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll hold the roll open for an additional 5 minutes as well for those members who are absent, which I don't believe we're missing very many.
See you, Amina.
Very good. We're going to go ahead and call absent and non-voting members for Senate Bill number 7. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Fong. Fong, aye. Huffman. Smythe. Swanson. Swanson, aye. Tirico.
Aye.
Tirico, aye.
That was SB 7, right? Not I.
That's right. Very good. That bill is out. Senate Bill 542. Madam Secretary, please call the roll for the absent and non-voting members.
Buchanan. Fong. Fong, aye. Huffman. Tirico. Tirico, aye.
Very good. That bill is also out. Very good. We're going to leave the roll open for an additional 5 minutes for the absent and non-voting members.
Smythe, aye on